service technician with the Ford Hall Company. This is the Ford Hall Company algae suite. This is a single baffle, single weir, launder, 001 unit. What I'm going to talk about today is the maintenance that you'll be doing on the units from time to time, which will consist of changing the brushes out when they're worn and hosing the brushes off when they need to be cleaned. First thing, how do you know when it's time to change the brushes? The brushes are the bristles on the brushes are approximately 3 inches long. You need to be changed when they're around 1.5 inches to 1.75 inches long. When you're changing these brushes, you'll need a 9/16 wrench and ratchet with a deep well socket. What you'll do is when you're changing the brush, you'll take the new replacement brush, which is generally gotten from us, and is pre-cut by us at our factory and labeled on the back of the brush as the position and the unit that it goes. When you're changing these brushes, you can do it one of two ways. You can either take the new brush, hold it up next to the old brush, mark it with a marker at the top of the brush holder, loosen the bolts which holds the brush, remove the old brush, slide the new brush in, and tighten it back down. These bolts are held together with lock washers, so generally 3 to 5 pounds of torque is more than sufficient to tighten the bolts down. When you're changing the brushes, you'll notice that there's 2 little lips on the back of each brush holder. These brush holders, you need to make sure that that lip is wrapped around the back side of the brush when you're inserting the brush into the brush holder and tightening it down. After that's done, you switch to the next arm. Now, the main thing to remember when you're changing the brushes is if a brush arm has more than one brush on that particular arm, you have to change all the brushes on that arm. For instance, the top spillway, an outer weir arm. As you notice, it has 2 outer weir brushes, 2 top spillway brushes. When you're changing these brushes, you need to make sure that you change them all 4, because what happens as these bristles get shorter, the backs of these brushes will come into contact with the weir surface. And as these bristles get shorter, the back of this brush will come into contact with the concrete and get shorter. When you're changing these, you would want to go from a place on the brush arm that would not work, which will be the top of the brush, down to the brush holder, from the inside edge of the brush over to the brush holder, replacing all 4 brushes and tightening the bolts back down. Then you would move on to the other arms and repeat the process. After you've got all the brushes changed, you need to make sure that all the brush arms are put back in the proper position and that everything is back where it should be and ready to go. While you're in changing the brushes, we do recommend that you look at welds and all things over on the unit. That way, if there's a cracked weld or a broken weld, you'll spot it, and it can be repaired before a hang-up took care of. You may want to take a set of standard Allen wrenches and just check the set screws. Make sure that they're all tight. Once a year will be sufficient on that. The next little problem that would have to happen from time to time on these units is you may have a spring to break. This is something that's kind of like the starter on your car. You may own a car all your life, never replace the starter. Well, the springs is a lot similar to that. We have units that have been on for as much as 10 years and have never broken a spring. Then we've had springs that did break from time to time. You have 2 different lengths of springs on these units. You either have a 30-inch spring or you have a 26-inch spring. The only place that a 30-inch spring is used is on the inner baffle and the bottom springs, which are on your launder center. All the rest of the springs are 26s. If you have a spring break, you can tell us which arm it's on, and we have that documented in our paperwork, and we'll know which size spring to send you, especially if it's in the later models of the units that have been put in. When you're changing a spring, you need to follow the spring back to where its tensioner is. Release the tension by taking a Allen wrench and loosening the set screw. Slide the spring forward. The springs are held in with a little pigtail. What you'll need to do is take the pigtail of the new spring, rehook it in through the eyelet, put it back through the guide, follow it back to where the other pigtail was at, hook it in, and then you'll take and put your spring tension back to where it was. What I recommend doing is taking a black magic marker or some other marker and just put the mark on the steel where the spring tension was at before and pulling it back to that particular area. Now, that is about the limitations of the maintenance on this. The only other thing is once a week to once every 2 weeks, you may need to disengage the brushes and take a hose and clean them off, determining the rate of algae growth that you have at your particular plant. As far as removal of the unit can be taken off, but if it is taken off, it needs to be counterbalanced up top to accommodate the weight that has been removed from the arm. To take this unit off, we loosen these 4 set screws. The launder assembly will come off in one piece. We loosen these 4 bolts. The rest of the arm will come off. It comes off in 2 pieces. But again, you need to make sure that if you take the unit off, that you replace it with appropriate counterweights. The only people who tend to take this unit off is in areas where they have trouble with the clarifier freezing up in the wintertime. In the wintertime, if you're going to have a bad ice storm, or if you have trouble with the clarifier freezing over, we do recommend that you disengage the brushes. Because what happens, the swivels, which allows the arm to pivot up and down and left and right, they can freeze and can create a problem with a hang-up. This is something that very rarely happens, but it can happen. If for some reason you ever have a problem with the algae sweep, our 1-800 number is located on our patent, which is located on the outer baffle collar on the units. That way, if you've lost our number, you can always get our number off of that patent plate. Next little thing that I'd like to go over with you is I'd like to demonstrate how to engage and disengage the brushes. And you can do that while standing on the catwalk using the lockout pole. You want the unit with the brushes, when you're standing on the catwalk, be on the right-hand side of the catwalk on the clockwise unit, on the left-hand side of the catwalk on the counterclockwise unit. They won't stop that right now. This is the lockout pole, which is used to engage and disengage the brushes. Now when you're engaging and disengaging the brushes, you want to do it using your upper body strength, your upper arm. Take the hook that's on the end of the pole, hook it into the eyelet, which is located on the brush arm, go up, set it over on the hook. Take your hose the brush off. If you've got any big gobs of algae, you can take the lockout pole, knock them loose, clean them off. After you get done with that arm, to re-engage it, just do the process, making sure that you put it back in the position that it was in before. That way it's going to be cleaning the proper surface. Now, when you're engaging and disengaging these brushes, you may find that you can't just go 1, 2, 3, 4 straight across with the brushes. For instance, your outer baffle and your inner rear brush arms, you have to have the outer baffle brush disengaged before you can disengage the inner rear brush. The reason for that is there's just not enough room between the baffle and weir to disengage one before the other. On some units you may be able to do that, especially a split unit, but this one is not. It's all located on one arm. Hose the brushes out. If you got any big gobs, clean them off with the pole. Re-engage the brushes. Doing the opposite of what you were doing before. Then continuing on to the other arm. Disengage it. Clean the brushes off, hose them off. Re-engage. Continue. Hose it out. Clean any algae that's built up on the brushes off. Back up. Re-engage. The launder assemblies are a little bit different due to the fact that they have 4 springs on them as compared to 2 on the rest of the arms. So they are just a little bit tougher to engage and disengage than the rest of the unit. Good. then clean the brushes, and you can put them back in their position again. Now, we have some plants that only run these a few days a week, some that runs them all the time. I've been doing this for about 6 years now. My experience with it, let the brushes run all the time. It's going to keep your tanks a whole lot cleaner, but you may wear a few more brushes out. Now, in the wintertime, if you want to leave the brushes disengaged for long periods of time, that's fine. But, we totally leave that up to the plant people as to how they wish to do that. As far as the field service guys, the guys that works on these all the time, generally you're going to have some growth in the wintertime. You may wear a few more brushes out, but it will help to keep your tanks clean in the winter as well. So I'm going to re-engage the longer assembly brushes. Lockout pole is always, like we towards the end of the demonstration, lockout pole is stainless steel. What we do is we've left the handle hollow. That way, if you want to attach it to the catwalk using a rope or a cable, you can do that, because where it's stainless, if you drop it at the bottom of the tank, then that means you're going to have to drain the tank to remove the pole. You're not going to be able to fish it out with a magnet. So that may be something to keep into consideration with your lockout pole. This concludes our little talk about the maintenance and stuff on the algae sweep system. So if there's ever any questions about anything on this unit, feel free to call us at our 1-800 number, and Jeannie Cooper, Katie Avery, or Melissa Gill will be glad to answer any of those questions. And if they're not able to, then they'll get you in touch with one of the field service technicians, and we'll get back to you and do our best to answer any questions that you have.